Hello and welcome to Millions and Mentors, where we discuss the setbacks, failures, speed bumps, and achievements of successful individuals and mentors in all industries. Let's dive in to hear the stories that elevate and inspire us all. Today we have the lovely, beautiful, and amazing Christine here with us. Thank you for joining me, Christine. I love
Well,
having you.
thank you.
One of the reasons why I'm glad to have her on the show today is because she is one of the best mentors to ever exist. Christine owns a Realty One Group in Clearwater, Florida. She is a successful broker. She is also a former attorney. And she is an entrepreneur who has started and run multiple businesses throughout her career. Christine, I wanted to talk to you today because what we're doing is we're inspiring, people in all industries and trying to bring motivational stories. We want to talk about, what speed bumps have you gone through throughout your career to get to where you are now. But let's go back to the beginning. I want to hear, because you're not actually from the United States. Tell us a little bit about where you're from and what your upbringing was like.
Well, I was born in Finland, born and raised. I grew up in the capital, Helsinki, and in the suburbs of Helsinki. It's called Espoo.
Love it. Okay.
And my dad was an airline pilot. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. And she went to school to become a secretary. And that was,
They have a school for that.
they actually did have a school for that. And it was actually ironically run by the same people who ran the English school in the country, which is a bunch of American Catholic nuns.
Oh, interesting.
And so my mom was kind of exposed to that group and decided that she wanted me to go to the English school to learn English so that I could possibly survive outside of Finland, which has a grand total of 6 million people.
Well, I can tell you, you do speak perfect English, so this is very impressive. I mean, you've got Arnold Schwarzenegger, who still can't speak English, and he's been in this country for, 40, 50 years now. So how did you learn how to speak English?
Well, so the English school, it started with kindergarten when you were 5, and my mom was under the incorrect impression that you needed to speak fluent English by the time you went to that school. So she decided when I was 4 years old that she was going to enroll me in the English school, and then she realized I didn't speak a word of English. So at the time we had C cassettes, and my brother was 2 years older than I was, and we would drive him to school. And on the way to school, we would listen to this C cassette, and I would have to repeat, like, apple, apple.
That's great. Now, did you have like a Walkman type deal too, or was it only in the car when you were learning?
It was only in the car because I was 4, so I didn't have a Walkman. And then, to my surprise, I went to my first day of school, and I was the only one who spoke English.
Wow,
that
so
was
you're
kind of
already
funny.
a step ahead, first day of school.
That was kind of funny.
Love it. Okay. And tell us about your dad. He was an airline pilot?
Yeah, my parents got married when they were really young. They were in their early 20s. I think my mom was 21. And so my dad was the typical man of the house. He made all the money and he traveled a lot. Yeah, he was one of those people who came home, sat down, and expected his meal to be in front of him and the coffee to be made, and very typical in the 60s and 70s, I suppose, or at least it was in Finland.
It was here too, absolutely. Now it's toxic masculinity, depending on who you ask. So tell us about the role that he played in you becoming successful. Now, was he supportive of what you were doing, or did he want you to kind of follow in your mom's footsteps and go to secretary school and do that kind of thing?
Oh, no, no, no. He wanted to make sure that I would survive without a man. So he made damn sure that I had a good education. When I was 5, he asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I told him I wanted to be an airline pilot, just like him. And he told me that was wrong answer. He said, you can't become an airline pilot. And I said, why? And he said, because you're a woman. And I said, oh. And he said, come up with something else. And I said, I don't know then. And he goes, well, I'll give you 2 options. You're going to become a lawyer or a business administration person. And I go, well, what does a business administration person do? He's like, I don't know. They like calculate stuff. And I'm like, well, I'm not really that interested in math. So I guess I'll become a lawyer. And I did a few years later.
That is awesome. Good for you. So tell me about Finland. I'm very curious to know what's it like.
Well, it is a small country and it has pretty bad weather. It's kind of like Alaska, where 9 months out of the year it's really, really dark, and then 3 months out of the year it's extremely light for 24 hours a day. So it's kind of an interesting environment to grow up in, and I don't think I realized it until I left, but I feel like you're subject to these manic depressive cycles when you live there because, I only started noticing it on social media after I moved, that there was a trend with what everyone posted, all my friends posted in Finland was, spring would come and the posts would start being like, oh, the days are getting longer and longer and yay. And, the bar terraces are opening up and I can have a beer outside. And then it becomes summer and everybody's like, yay.
Let's go.
It starts going down and it's like, well, the days are getting shorter and it's getting cold and bleak and dark and wet and then it's like, oh, life sucks and this is so depressing. And then it goes into this really depressing mode and then it starts up again in the spring where it starts getting, people start getting energized again and it's just everybody in the country seems to be going through these cycles. And you don't realize it when you live there, that's kind of the environment that you're in. It really depends on what kind of person you are because I was very impacted by weather. So it impacted my mood a lot. And so, in the wintertime, you wake up in the morning, you have no idea if it's morning or midnight because it's just as dark outside. And then you start prepping and, giving yourself pep talks to make it through the day. And you're like, oh, it's going to be a great day. And it's actually daytime and I'm going to make it to work now. And it's challenging, especially if you're in any sort of leadership role, because everybody's depressed. And so you have to kind of bring that energy in and try to get everybody out of that funk and into, being productive and happier. And they actually have lights there, like daylight lights that you put on your desk to bring the sun into your...
A picture of the beach on the wall.
Well, but they call it light therapy. Like they'll put an actual light that resembles a solar light on a desk, and then that's supposed to make you feel like it's not dark all the time.
Oh, that's great. By the way, I did look up 9% of the pilots in America are female. So had you wanted to become a pilot?
I think at the time when I was 5, there was only one female pilot.
Wow. Okay.
In Finland. I'm not sure what the statistics were in the States, but in Finland, I believe there was only one. And my dad made a big point out of explaining that if you needed to get control of the jet, that you didn't have the same strength as a man would to pull the plane up, that type of thing.
Interesting story. Well, tell us a little bit about what brought you over to the U.S.
Oh, it was the weather.
The weather.
Yeah, it was 100% the weather.
Sunshine.
So, I had graduated law school. I knew I wanted to go somewhere where the sun shined, and I decided I was going to move to LA.
Okay, done with the dark.
And I remember the managing partner of the law firm I used to work for. I told him I was quitting and moving to the U.S. And he said, all right, why quit? Why don't you just take 6 months and we'll get you a position with a big firm in New York and you can be a trainee there or, have some sort of training position at a U.S. firm for 6 months and then you'll come back and, continue on your path as a lawyer. I told him I didn't plan to come back, but if I did, I would make damn sure that every single day of that 6 months that I was going to be gone, the sun would be shining. And another partner who later became his wife said, a girl's got to do what a girl's got to do. Just let her go.
Good. Well, I'm glad you made that transition over to the U.S. And what year was that?
That was, oh goodness, that was 1997.
Okay. And have you been here ever since?
No, I moved back and forth. So the issue was you can't just move to the US. You have to have a visa or, residency or something.
Right.
And so when I first moved, I was here on a tourist visa. And coming close to the end of my visa being valid, I started looking into getting a job, any job that would keep me in the US. And I had a friend who was a doctor, an eye surgeon, and he said that he could hire me to be an assistant at his practice. And so I debated if I went to law school for all those years to become an assistant at a eye surgeon's practice, and I just decided that the cost was too high and I was probably better off just going back to Finland and practicing law for a few years and taking another run at moving to the States, later on in life.
And so now you own a brokerage. Tell me a little bit about how you got started in real estate.
Well, that was largely due to my incredibly persistent husband who told me I should get into real estate. Part of that had to do with us starting a flip business back in 2010. And so I got real interested in real estate at the time. And I got my license when we moved to Florida in 2013. I've been dabbling in real estate ever since, but I really, really got into it when we moved to Arizona in 2017. And that's when I started getting serious about real estate. And I joined Realty One Group in Arizona, and I loved it. And I grew a team there. We had, when we were at our largest, we had 10 agents on our team. And then when we moved to Florida this year in 2023, I realized there was a big gaping hole on the map for a Realty One Group office in Clearwater. So I contacted Realty One Group Corporate and said, I want to join a Realty One Group in Clearwater. And they said, there isn't one there.
Why
And I
don't
said,
you start
well,
one?
there needs to be one there. And so, yeah, I got my broker's license and started the Realty One Group office in Clearwater.
That's great. That's great. Now, tell me a little bit about how you get started in real estate, because I think the most difficult thing is, there's more than 3 million realtors in the United States, and you basically go to school, and once you come out with school, you join a brokerage, and once you join that brokerage, you've got a little bit of training, but they don't actually teach you how to go out and become a successful realtor. So how did you do it so quickly?
Well, I mean, I benefited a lot from the fact that I had been an attorney for so many years and I was very comfortable dealing with transactions in general. I had done M&A transactions of, high dollar values. So buying and selling a house was kind of a very simple transaction in the book of transactions. So I was very comfortable with transactions, and I think a lot of clients kind of picked up on that it was something that was not difficult. So building confidence, I think, is the first step for any realtor, so that they kind of come across as knowing what they're doing, because a client is entrusting them to either buy or sell a home, and they want the outcome to be as good as possible. Well, I think having a good mentor is really key to anybody who's starting out.
Great word.
Most brokerages have a mentorship program that you can join. Most of them are actually compulsory for a few transactions, typically 5. Some have 10. I think 5 is a good number of transactions to do hand in hand with your mentor and really figure out the basics of how it works. 5 transactions is not enough to master a transaction. There's going to be situations that even I come across these days where I'm like, I've never seen that happen before, and how do I navigate my way out of it? But that's what your broker's for. You ask your broker, like, hey, I came across this weird situation, but you know the basics, you know how it works by the end of your 5 transactions typically. The hardest part about becoming a realtor is the fact that it takes a little bit of time for you to build a pipeline. And for those people, those buyers and sellers in the pipeline, for the timing to work out. So you can't pressure somebody to buy or sell a home. The timing has to be right for them. And so when you first get started, the odds of you coming across a buyer or seller who wants to buy or sell a home this week are fairly low. Most people are going to be on a timeline that's, a few months away. There are those people who really are ready to buy. They'll contact you and they're like, I want to put in an offer on this house. Some of them haven't even seen it or won't even see it. I've had quite a few clients that have bought a property sight unseen. And with today's technology, it's possible to make an informed purchase without actually stepping foot in the property. But the trust between the client and the realtor has to be really high because there's things you can't see on camera with a walkthrough or things like that. You need to be able to trust your realtor.
Right, that it's next door to a trash dump or something.
Right. And so, I've had clients who have closed on properties even from a different country entirely. And I still remember the very first one I did where the client flew in on the day of closing. And so we drove over to the property. It was a $2.5 million property, which at the time was pretty high dollar. And we drove over there and my client sat in the car and said, wouldn't it be funny if I hated the house? And I said, no, it wouldn't be funny at all. It would be awful. But luckily she loved the house. So
That's great. Good. Glad to hear it. Okay, so what do you recommend for someone who's brand new and wants to get leads? Do you cold call? Do you door knock? Do you buy digital leads? Do you just go out and shake hands and pass out your business card? Do you tackle people in the middle of the street and force them to buy a house from you?
Well, I think the key is that you have to be working multiple channels always. You can't just focus on one channel. So there's different ways to generate leads, and you have to be working at least 3 or 4 of them at all times. You don't want all your eggs to be in one basket. So you want to be using multiple channels. And like I said, the timing component is going to be the trickiest piece of it, because you might build great rapport and a good relationship with somebody who's going to end up using you as their realtor, but who's just not ready right now. So you have to be able to build a pipeline of people who are more ready and less ready and kind of go from there. And 2 years into it, some of the people that you started off with 2 years ago are going to be ready to buy. And some of the ones that you already helped buy a home are going to be ready to sell. So you have to do multiple channels. There isn't a one size fits all for any of that. So basically, I'm going to quote my former broker from Arizona. She's freaking awesome. Her name's Mandy Neat. And
Hi,
she's, hey, Mandy. She currently works for the commissioner in Arizona. And, but she was fantastic. And one of her most famous quotes that she'd always drop into a conversation is, you do you. So somebody might be really great at cold calling and somebody else will suck at it. I'm terrible at cold calling. I don't like to do it.
I hate it.
I am even worse at door knocking. I fear for my life. I feel like if I'm going to knock on somebody's door, I'm probably going to get shot. And
it's 2023. Absolutely.
And it's, it shows from my demeanor too. So, and I know agents who are extremely successful doing both those things. So you kind of have to figure out what works for you. And I think that's an important thing that every mentor should recognize is you're not trying to create a mini version of yourself. And when you're getting mentored, your ambition shouldn't be to become a version of your mentor. It should be to become the best version of you. And so each and every one of us has strengths and weaknesses, and you want to play on your strengths, and they might be very different from mine. But we need to figure out what they are, bring them out, and make you successful with you being you.
Tell me the hardest thing about being an entrepreneur.
The hardest part about being an entrepreneur is probably the fact that you feel alone often, and you really need to surround yourself with people who support you and who can help you. And there's going to be days where you feel like a total failure, and you just gotta not lose faith and keep going and keep chugging away. And if you consistently keep doing what you're doing, you're going to be successful. It just takes patience and time.
The first time you decided you wanted to start a company, did you just hop on Google and search up how to start a company? Or where do you begin? If I want to start my own brokerage and I am currently a realtor, what do I do to take it to that next level?
Well, in response to your first question, I had the benefit of being an attorney, so I had helped hundreds of clients start companies. So I knew what the process was from a mechanical standpoint, from a legal standpoint. I knew what was involved. I had also worked for an investor for a number of years, so we did capital investments into companies and helped them grow. So I was very familiar with business plans and the execution of them, and some of those companies that we invested in were startups. So I had experience seeing how it was done. So I didn't need to go on Google. Also, Google wasn't big at that point in time yet. The first thing you're going to have to decide is, how big do you want to become down the line? And that will help you decide what path might make sense for you. So, for example, if you're planning to have a brokerage of, let's say, 10 agents or less, keeping things simple might be the easiest way to go. Whereas if you plan to become a lot larger, then a franchise might be the way to go, because with a franchise, you basically reinventing the wheel in a lot of areas. A lot of franchises have a lot to offer when it comes to technology and training and back end things and just branding to start with. So I opted for that path because, well, number one, I was very familiar with Realty One Group and all the tools and resources they had because I had used them as a team lead and as an agent in the past. And I had no interest, time, or patience to start reinventing all of that. And even if I dedicated the next 10 years to try to develop those kinds of tools, and even if I wanted to invest insane amounts of money into doing that, I would still probably not quite achieve the same level that Realty One Group has, because they've put years and years and years and a lot of money into developing all this. So for me, the franchise was an obvious choice because I wanted to be able to offer the highest level of professionalism and the highest level of support to our agents.
Realty One Group Beyond in Clearwater is a very team-based, and you offer team building and coaching. So tell me a little bit about that. If I'm already a successful realtor in my career and I come to you and say, hey, teach me how to build a team because I don't have a 401k and I'd like to retire someday. And as realtors, we don't have a retirement plan. So tell me how building a team benefits you for long-term growth and wealth.
So one of the things that I learned when I was building a team was that it takes a lot of work. And one of the ambitions I had from day one for Realty One Group Beyond in Clearwater was to help teams and help the team leaders by taking a lot of the stuff that they have on their plate away from their plate so that they can really focus on building the business, and I can support team development and educating and mentoring the team members. Going from being a single agent, which typically the way it happens is you're a single agent, you become a top producer, your sales are really high, and then you go, oh, what's the next step? How do I grow from here? And then the obvious choice is to start building a team. And typically the situation is you have too many leads to handle. So you need somebody to help you with the clientele because you've grown so much. And so that's a great way for somebody who is fairly new to the business to really get those leads that are already committed and ready to buy and they're already clients of the team lead. It's a very fast way of getting into real estate is to join a team that's successful and that will actually give you leads. The thing you need to be careful of is that every team will say they have leads, and every team will say that they're going to give you leads, and some of them will deliver on that promise and others won't. So, for example, I had friends who joined teams and they say, oh, we're going to give you leads. And the very first thing they do is they give you a spreadsheet which has the contact information for every human being who has been to an open house of their team
Here's
during
a
the
phone
past
book.
5 years, and they tell you to start cold calling them. And they've already handed that same spreadsheet to 6 other agents that same month, and they're all bombarding these same people. Those are not leads. A
Absolutely.
lead needs to be a lot warmer, a lot more ready to buy, and not just a random phone book of contact information. And it's depressing if, a team leader has promised you these leads, and then that's what ends up happening is they just slap you with a phone book. And, on the flip side of that, if you work really hard and you find your own leads, and through your own relationships, you find a client, some of these teams are going to very heavily tap into the revenue from that sale. So you're going to have a pretty hefty split, which is worth it if you're getting a bunch of really good leads. But if you're only getting that spreadsheet with, for cold calling, and then you still have to pay the team on a deal that you put together all on your own,
Right.
then that becomes depressing and imbalanced, really.
Right. Funny you should mention phone book. One of my first career jobs was with the company Aflac, which is a insurance company. And I went through all of this training, and I was super excited because the earning potential was huge. And on my very first day, they had never mentioned this before, but they said that they were going to provide the leads, and they would all be available for you from the jump. So I get to work 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm bright, ready to go. And they take me to essentially the lunchroom in the back, sit me down at a table, put a telephone in front of me. And that's when they had the cord and, the whole thing. And they slap down a phone book in front of me, just like that. And they say, okay, turn to page 1, start calling businesses. And I looked at him like he was crazy. And I said, I thought you were providing me with leads. He says, these are leads. This is how we do it. And so I turned the page open and I sat there and stared at it for about 20 minutes. And I finally got the nerve up to make a phone call. And the very first company that I called was like, you guys have called me like 500 times. Can you please take me off your list? And I was like, what list? We didn't have a list of, businesses that we already did business with. So the next phone call that I called, the guy was like, I've been with your company for 12 years already. Why are you calling me? And I was like, I closed the book, got up and left. And I was like, this, cold calling is not for me. And I knew from that point forward, cold calling is definitely not for me. So it's good that we have these new channels these days because, that kind of thing is frustrating to no end.
I did cold calling too back in the day. There was a big recession in Finland at one point, and at the time, all the jobs were being advertised in like actual physical newspapers. And the jobs section had dwindled from several pages in the Sunday paper to exactly 2 positions. One was cleaning on cruise ships. That was an available position. They needed people to do that.
Sounds rather gross.
Yeah, that wasn't for me. I knew it from the get-go because you need to clean up a lot of vomit when you do that because everybody parties on these cruise ships
drunk
like crazy.
The whole time, yeah.
And then the second position was telemarketing. And so I decided to give telemarketing a whirl. And same thing, except they didn't give the same phone book to everybody. They had photocopied different pages of them. And so they rotated who was calling which letter of the alphabet. And they gave me a couple of pages of the phone book and told me to start calling. And my job was to sell a magazine. It was called Finland's Nature.
Wow.
And
Okay.
part of the proceeds of those sales went to um, nature preservation. And so that was the hook. Like, oh, buy this magazine. I know you're not going to read it, but some of it goes to charity. And so I started calling, and I have a lot of sympathy when I get cold calls these days because I've been in the shoes of the person making that call, and I know how awful it is when they hang up or they start yelling at you or whatnot, and they're just, trying to do a job. But it was a terrible experience. I had so many people hang up and yell at me, and I did have quite a few who bought that dumb magazine too. So, but it was definitely not something I enjoyed or had fun with. And I met people who were really good at cold calling and who actually thought it was fun.
There are people out there who enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm
Hard
not
to
one of them.
believe. No, no, me neither. Now, tell me, what lessons have you learned from your road to success that you can teach, the young generations out there? Tell us about failures, frustrations, speed bumps that you've had, just, things that we should look out for and be aware of before we experience them.
Well, the first thing is that, you really should listen to advice that other people give. Not all of it, and you have to take it with a grain of salt. But don't be stubborn. When you're getting advice, really consider if there's something to it. If there is, then make the adjustments that are necessary. You don't have to make the same mistakes that everybody else has made. You can actually learn from the mistakes of others. One thing that I learned the hard way was that you should always surround yourself with people who are doing a similar thing, and try not to do things all by yourself. And I banged my head against the wall multiple times doing that because I had actually been successful doing things just on my own. I had started a law firm in Finland, and I had built it all on my own. And then when I had a venture later in life that was a tech company, all the investors kept telling me that I needed a team. And I'm like, yeah, I don't need a team. I'm going to outsource the tech development and this and that and the sales. And yeah, I should have listened to them. I really should have had a team from the get-go. And I learned a lot in that process.
For anyone out there who's listening who wants to become successful in real estate, and you mentioned, something about attitude. If I want to join a team, um, do I need to be optimistic all the time? Do I need to be an attentive listener? Do I need to be opinionated about things? I mean, have you ever had to fire somebody from a team, or have you ever gotten rid of someone?
I have. It's a tough call to make. I think it's a matter of it has to feel right for everybody involved. So if it's not a good fit, it's another thing I've learned the hard way. If it's not a good fit, it's not going to end well. And it's better to let go of somebody who's not a good fit with you and who doesn't mesh well with you, and or who's bringing people down, or anything that is energy draining. Um, and it depends on the people, obviously. It takes two parties for it to work. So, but I've learned that if it's not a good fit, it's not going to become a good fit. It's not, people that don't mesh well with you, they're not going to start meshing well with you. So it's better for them to find someone else to work with, another team, another personality. There's very different personalities, and sometimes some people want a similar personality to work with, and some want the opposite personality to work with, and some are in between. So if you have somebody on the team who's not really successful and you're not getting them there, then that's not a good fit.
And if I come to you and I say, "Hey, Chris, I want to join your brokerage, and take it to the next level. I want to start a team." How do you find, or do I find team members? How do I build this team?
So for me, when I was building my team, my broker was instrumental in helping me grow. It's actually kind of tough to recruit agents on your own. It's much easier to do through your broker because the broker is exposed to new agents and experienced agents, and I had a great relationship with my broker when I was building my team, and she knew when she met somebody if that person would mesh well with me or not. So she would introduce me to agents who she thought I would mesh well with, and she would typically have them interview with a couple of teams, but all the ones that she recommended ended up joining my team, and it was for a reason. She was very good at knowing the type of personality that would work well with me.
Give you a glowing review. Tell me about your mentor.
So I had a couple of mentors during my career. I think the ones that had the most impact were the ones that were the partners at the firm I started out with, the law firm. There were two mentors that I worked with. One was male and one was female. And oh gosh, I learned so much from both of them. I remember when I started my own firm, and I had a client who came in and said they had a big dispute going on, and I had specialized in international arbitration, which was what my mentor, Carita Valgren, was really known for. And my client or potential client sat there and said, "Explain to me why I should hire you." And I said, "Because I learned from the best. And there's only a handful of attorneys that are on the same level as my mentor in this country, and they're not going to be on the other side of the table because your dispute's too small."
Imagine this scenario. I just got my real estate license. I'm looking to join a brokerage. You mentioned mentors. If I want to join a brokerage to find a mentor, am I out there interviewing brokers specifically? Because I feel like a lot of times, the managing broker, the person you should be interviewing with, isn't actually the person who's interviewing you, or may not be the person who is giving you that mentorship. Am I looking for somebody who's going to be there to answer all my questions, will answer the phone when I call? Can I knock on the door at 8:30 p.m.? If I need something, I mean, is looking for the broker more important or looking for the brokerage more important?
The broker, absolutely. You want to make sure that your brokerage is offering you what you need to succeed. And so you want to make sure that they have training and tools and resources available that will help you with your career. But the most important component is going to be the broker, because the broker's only job is to make you succeed. And so if they're good at their job, you're going to be successful and you're going to get the support that you need. That doesn't mean that your broker is going to be available 24/7. Most brokerages and most brokers have certain times of day when they respond to their agents' inquiries. If you have some sort of panic mode and you need to bypass everything and you need an answer right away, then you contact a hotline or use the emergency line to contact your broker. But my broker always used to say that no transaction is going to move forward between 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. Like overnight. There's nothing that's on fire that will get worse by 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. So you kind of also have to have the perspective of maybe you don't need that answer at midnight, even if somebody is going ballistic, because nothing is going to happen in that transaction of relevance in the middle of the night.
Tell me about what makes a good broker versus someone you want to avoid.
Well, I have personally have really good experiences with brokers, so I'm not sure I can give you a worst case scenario, but I would say that your broker is a good one if they take personal interest in you and they understand that their job is to make you successful, and that if you fail, they're pretty bad at their job. They're failing too. I think that being there and offering the support that you need and making it a personal journey is what makes a good broker. And I guess inversely then, somebody who is detached and to whom you're a number and who just puts you in a robotic pipeline of, oh, here's 10 sheets of paper, do all this stuff, and you're going to be great. I don't think those are going to really have a positive impact on what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. I know Realty One Group has a program called One Lux, which is geared towards the luxury sector. Tell me a little bit about how you get into, that program and involved with the luxury homes, and is it worth it to just focus on the luxury sector versus money's where the masses are at the bottom with the houses that people can afford? What's the benefit of going strictly luxury?
I don't think there's a single agent out there who goes strictly luxury. You kind of have to have, it's again, putting all your eggs in one basket. The process for a luxury buyer or seller to go through with a transaction can take a lot of time. And so, unless you intend to just sit around waiting for that to happen, it's probably smarter to have a little bit of a mix with the type of properties that you are targeting. Most luxury agents, they might focus heavily on luxury and they might brand themselves strictly as luxury, but they will all have agents on their teams who deal with something that's not luxury. You don't really tell a client to go away just because the price point is lower than you're used to, but the luxury agents just don't personally handle those transactions. They have agents on their teams who will happily work with those clients, and then the team lead is involved to the degree that's necessary in the transaction.
Again, another benefit of having your own team as well. Tell me a little bit about what sets Realty One Group beyond in Clearwater apart from all of the other brokerages in the area.
Well, I think that we have really put a lot of emphasis into being an approachable brokerage with a lot of modern technology and modern touches. We have our own recording studio where people can record their own podcasts and content. With Realty One Group in general, the technology and the training support is fantastic. It's the best I've ever seen.
Christine, any last thoughts for our listeners out there?
Just be you. Just be you. And, find what it is that makes you tick. Find what works for you, and don't try to become somebody you're not. Just figure out how to become the best version of you and play on your strengths and minimize your weaknesses.
Christine, 100 million plus in sales in your first few years in real estate. You have gone on to start your own brokerage in beautiful Clearwater, Florida. You are an amazing individual. You are an inspiration to us all. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today on Millions in Mentors, and we look forward to talking to you again in the future.
Thank you. Thank you.
All righty. Thanks.